My girlfriend vanished. Her note said, "Don't look for me." I replied, "No problem." Then I found out she stole my late mother's jeweled collection worth $380,000. The police found her, and her only calls were to beg me to drop charges. I, 32M, woke up to an empty apartment and a handwritten note on my kitchen counter. The morning light streaming through the windows felt different somehow, colder. My girlfriend of 2 years had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a few hastily scrawled words that would change everything. The note was simple: "Don't look for me. It's better this way. Please understand." No explanation, no goodbye, just those 11 words that felt like a slap across the face. I stared at her familiar handwriting, the same loops and curves I'd seen on countless grocery lists and birthday cards. My first instinct was confusion, then anger, then something resembling relief. I crumpled the note and tossed it toward the trash can. Fine. If she wanted to disappear, that was her choice. I wasn't going to chase after someone who clearly didn't want to be found. 2 years of my life, gone just like that. I grabbed my coffee mug and headed to work, determined to move on. The apartment felt eerily quiet over the next few days. Her clothes were gone from the closet, her toiletries missing from the bathroom counter. She'd been thorough, I had to give her that. Even her favorite coffee mug had disappeared. I found myself checking my phone constantly, expecting a text or call that never came. My friends asked where she was, and I gave them the same response every time: she left, and I wasn't looking for her. It was exactly 1 week later when I decided to check on my mother's jewelry collection. Mom had passed away 3 years ago, leaving me her entire estate, including a substantial collection of vintage jewelry she'd inherited from her own mother. The pieces were stored in a small safe in my bedroom closet, something I rarely opened except for insurance purposes or the occasional appraisal. My hands trembled as I input the combination. The safe door swung open to reveal empty velvet boxes and bare metal shelves. Every single piece was gone: the diamond tennis bracelet, the emerald earrings, the pearl necklace set, the antique rings. 43 pieces in total, worth nearly $400,000 according to the last appraisal. The realization hit me like a freight train. She hadn't just left me. She'd robbed me. I called the police immediately. Detective Rodriguez arrived within an hour, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened to my story while taking notes, occasionally asking for clarification about the timeline and the missing items. When I showed her the empty safe and the insurance documentation, her expression grew serious. The detective explained that this was clearly premeditated theft. My ex-girlfriend had likely been planning this for weeks, maybe months. She asked about our relationship, whether I'd noticed any changes in her behavior recently. Looking back, there had been signs. She'd been asking more questions about my mother's jewelry, showing unusual interest in the safe's location. I thought she was just being curious about family heirlooms. The investigation moved quickly. Detective Rodriguez traced my ex-girlfriend's movements through credit card transactions and surveillance footage. She'd driven straight to a jewelry dealer in the next state, selling several pieces for cash before disappearing again. The dealer, thankfully, had security cameras and proper documentation. The police had clear evidence of the theft and her identity. Within 10 days, they tracked her down to a cheap motel 2 states away. She was arrested without incident, though Detective Rodriguez mentioned she seemed surprised they'd found her so quickly. Apparently, she'd assumed I wouldn't notice the missing jewelry for months. The phone call started the next day. The jail allowed her 3 calls, and every single one came to my number. I let the first 2 go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me on the 3rd attempt. Her voice sounded different, smaller, desperate. She begged me to drop the charges, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. She promised to return everything if I would just call off the police. I listened to her pleas with a strange sense of detachment. This was the same woman who'd shared my bed for 2 years, who'd met my friends and family, who'd told me she loved me just weeks before vanishing with my most precious possessions. Now she wanted mercy. Her lawyer called next, a public defender who explained that my ex-girlfriend was facing serious felony charges. Grand theft, burglary, fraud. The charges were stacking up. He suggested we could work out a plea deal if I was willing to cooperate. The stolen jewelry had been recovered, though several pieces had already been sold and would need to be replaced through insurance claims. I met with the prosecutor, a stern woman who laid out the case against my ex-girlfriend. The evidence was overwhelming: security footage, witness testimony, physical evidence linking her to the crimes. She was looking at potentially 10 years in prison if convicted on all charges. The prosecutor asked if I wanted to pursue full prosecution or consider a reduced plea. The decision should have been easy, but I found myself struggling with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted justice, wanted her to face the full consequences of her betrayal. Another part of me just wanted this nightmare to end and to move on with my life. The jewelry was being returned. The financial damage would be covered by insurance. What would I gain from destroying her life completely? Update 1. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following month. During this time, the calls from jail continued sporadically. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she angry, sometimes she tried to manipulate me with memories of better times. She reminded me of vacations we'd taken, inside jokes we'd shared, promises we'd made to each other. Each call felt like psychological warfare. Her family reached out too. Her mother called, explaining that her daughter had been struggling with financial problems and had made terrible decisions. She begged me to show mercy, to remember the good times. Her sister sent text messages asking me to consider the impact on their family name and reputation. The pressure was mounting from all sides. I started seeing a therapist to help process everything. Dr. Chin helped me understand that my ex-girlfriend's actions were a profound betrayal of trust that went far beyond simple theft. She'd violated the sanctity of my home, stolen irreplaceable family heirlooms, and planned an elaborate deception while maintaining an intimate relationship with me. The psychological damage was as significant as the financial loss. Meanwhile, Detective Rodriguez kept me updated on the investigation's progress. They discovered that my ex-girlfriend had been researching the jewelry for months, taking photos when I wasn't around, and even getting preliminary appraisals from other dealers. She'd opened a separate bank account under a fake name and had been planning her escape route for weeks. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was calculated fraud. The more I learned about the scope of her deception, the angrier I became. She'd been living a double life, playing the loving girlfriend while methodically planning to rob me blind. Every kiss, every "I love you," every intimate moment had been tainted by her ulterior motives. I felt like a fool for not seeing the signs sooner. Update 2. 3 weeks before the trial, her lawyer made a formal plea offer. She would plead guilty to a reduced charge, serve 18 months in minimum security prison, and pay full restitution including interest and legal fees. In exchange, the more serious felony charges would be dropped. The prosecutor recommended I accept the deal, explaining that trials were expensive and unpredictable. I asked for time to consider the offer. That night, I sat in my empty apartment holding one of the recovered jewelry pieces, my grandmother's engagement ring. The diamond caught the light from my desk lamp, creating tiny rainbows on the wall. This ring had been worn by 3 generations of women in my family. She tried to sell it for drug money. I'd learned during the investigation that she developed a gambling addiction over the past year. Online poker, sports betting, cryptocurrency trading. She'd been hemorrhaging money and hiding the losses from me. The jewelry theft was her attempt to pay off mounting debts and start fresh somewhere else. In her mind, I would never notice the missing pieces because I rarely accessed the safe. Her addiction didn't excuse her actions, but it explained them. She'd chosen to steal from me rather than ask for help or admit she had a problem. She'd chosen deception over honesty, betrayal over trust. Even if I could forgive the gambling, I couldn't forgive the lies. The night before I had to respond to the plea offer, she called one final time. Her voice was barely a whisper as she told me she was sorry, that she'd loved me despite everything, that she understood if I could never forgive her. She said she'd been too ashamed to tell me about the gambling, too proud to ask for help. She begged me to remember the good times and to show mercy. I listened to her words and felt something inside me break. Not my heart, that had already been shattered. Something deeper, some fundamental trust in human nature. She was asking me to remember love while sitting in jail for betraying that same love. The irony was overwhelming. Update 3. I rejected the plea deal. The prosecutors seemed surprised by my decision, but I explained that accepting a reduced sentence felt like enabling her behavior. She needed to face the full consequences of her actions, not just for my sake, but for her own recovery. Real change required real accountability. The trial lasted 4 days. I testified about our relationship, the discovery of the theft, and the emotional impact of her betrayal. The defense tried to paint her as a victim of addiction who'd made desperate choices, but the prosecution's evidence was overwhelming. Security footage showed her calmly and methodically selecting which pieces to steal. Bank records revealed months of financial planning. This wasn't desperate addiction behavior, it was organized crime. Her family sat in the courtroom every day, shooting accusatory glances in my direction. I understood their pain, but I couldn't let their emotions override my need for justice. Their daughter had made choices, and choices had consequences. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 7 years in state prison with the possibility of parole in 4 years. She would also be required to pay full restitution and complete addiction counseling programs. As the bailiff led her away in handcuffs, she turned to look at me one final time. I saw no anger in her eyes, just resignation and something that might have been relief. Maybe she was finally ready to face the consequences of her actions. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. Justice had been served, but it couldn't undo the betrayal or restore my faith in the relationship we'd shared. I'd learned that love without trust was just an illusion, and that sometimes the people closest to us are capable of the deepest deceptions. 6 months later, I still live in the same apartment, though I've changed the locks and installed a new security system. The jewelry collection sits in a bank's safety deposit box now, where it probably should have been all along. I've started dating again, slowly and cautiously, but I find myself questioning potential partners' motives more than I'd like to admit. She writes me letters from prison occasionally, but I don't read them anymore. Detective Rodriguez told me she's doing well in the addiction counseling program and has earned her GED. Part of me hopes she finds genuine redemption and builds a better life when she's released. But that's her journey now, not mine. The most important lesson I learned is that closure doesn't come from revenge or forgiveness. It comes from accepting that some betrayals are so profound they permanently change you. I'm not the same person who found that note on his kitchen counter, and I never will be again. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. Maybe I needed to learn that trust is precious precisely because it can be broken, and that protecting yourself isn't cynical, it's necessary. Sometimes people ask if I regret prosecuting her to the full extent of the law. My answer is always the same. She made her choice when she decided to steal from me, and I made mine when I decided not to let her get away with it. In the end, we all live with the consequences of our decisions. The apartment is quiet now, but it's a different kind of quiet than before. It's the silence of peace rather than emptiness, of solitude chosen rather than abandonment forced. And for the first time in months, that feels like enough. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us. Please subscribe.